Greetings and welcome to the Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. I'm Phyllis Hollis, your host. As an extension of my Instagram page, Cerebral Women, this podcast offers insights into the visual art world. I interview artists, mainly artists of color and female artists who will freely articulate what inspires their creativity. In addition, you'll hear interesting perspectives from dedicated art professionals who work with artists and the art institutions that feature them. I'm confident that collectively, these individuals will indeed stimulate your mind as they do our eyes. Please know these interviews are conducted in my Manhattan apartment, so please forgive the background sounds of city life. Welcome to the Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. This episode features Vian Sora. Born in Baghdad, Iraq, she has lived and worked in Louisville, Kentucky since 2009. She received a BS from Mansour University in Baghdad and studied printmaking at the Istanbul Museum of Graphic Art in Istanbul, Turkey. Her work has been presented in solo and group exhibitions nationally and internationally, including the Baltimore Art Museum, Santa Barbara Museum of Art, Speed Art Museum Contemporary Art Center in Cincinnati, and the Sharjah Biennale, Istanbul Museum of Graphic Art, as well as the KMAC Triennial in Louisville, Kentucky, the Grinnell Museum of Art, among others. Commencing in 2025, Vian will have a traveling solo museum show at the Santa Barbara Museum of Art and the Speed Art Museum. Her work is included in several public and private collections. Enjoy this episode featuring abstract painter Vian Sora and visit cerebralwomen.com for her expanded bio. Vian, welcome to my podcast. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you. Me too. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yes. Let's begin with, when did you realize that you were an artist?
Well, I had two parts of my life. Well, as anyone else, and everybody start drawing early on. So pretty much when I was 6 or 7, that's what I wanted to be. But also I started actually practicing when I was 17, when I was in Baghdad. So pretty much early on, and took it very seriously, even when I was a teenager.
How do you define your practice?
My practice actually is very difficult to define in few words because I approach it as a way to break borders and a way for me to exist. It's my life imprint. It's a daily kind of, I think of it as a service. And by service, I service the work. But that's the entry point into it. Obviously, my background contributes a lot into it. My migration into this country plays a huge part of it. So I can't really sum it up in one sentence, but I would think about it as a very current, very involved into everyday's life, basically what's happened to me and my surrounding. And the works that I create, they're really emotional landscapes that don't necessarily exist in real life, but they're coming from many reference points of situations and places that I existed within.
Emotional landscapes, I love that.
Yeah.
Early on, do you recall if there was an artist who influenced you?
There are many artists who influenced my work early on. The first artists who influenced my works are actually the ancient Mesopotamian sculptors and painters who created some of the most intriguing creations that you could see in the Pergamon Museum and the Louvre and British Museum. So that was my first-hand kind of encounter with art, but also there are so many art history moments that influenced me. Da Vinci, but then going into artists like Francis Bacon and, for the living artists, I would mention also Richter, Albert Ullin, many, many names, Louis Bourgeois. Those are names that really influenced me. There are a few artists in Iraq that no one probably would know of. They lived around the time when I was a child. One of them is Faik Hassan. So these are some influences I can mention.
Are your memories reflected in your work?
Absolutely. My memories are within my work everywhere, and it serves as a backdrop to the work. And there is an interplay between memory and present. And I actually approach my work as an archaic but futuristic work within one landscape. So as much as it serves very historical moments, it's very current, but also I think about it in terms of consciousness as a collective consciousness moment in the future. So yeah, that would be the answer to that part.
How do you keep learning?
It's a great question because learning, in the recent years, I tend to spend an immense amount of time in the studio. So the most exciting part is also when I'm completing my deadlines with shows, and I do a lot of art travel. So of course I read and I expose myself to a lot of current exhibitions, but I also travel a lot. I go to a lot of shows, and every year I will take 2 big trips to like a major biennale with a lot of exhibitions around it. So these are the learning moments. It's from other artists, from other writers, and other human beings.
Interesting. While you're working, do you think about who your audience is and how they may try to understand your work?
I used to think about that, and I had 3 periods in my career where I really considered my audience. And also because of where I lived, because also there is a lot of surveillance and there is a lot of danger I could expose myself to through my subject matter, which was considered taboo in Iraq then. But then I have phases where I'm very immersed within the work, that I am my own audience, or the work is my own audience. And then whenever I'm completed with an exhibition, it's out there and it's the reality moment. I'm very much engaged and thinking about my audience, which make it a very interesting kind of practice itself, because you can't just think about everybody when you're working, but also you not consider your audience. It's a complicated kind of answer.
No, it's good. Was there ever a point where you leaned towards figurative painting?
Absolutely. All my work starts from there. And my early work was absolutely all figures. It was very heavily feminine bodies and also other bodies in the work. But now the figures became forms, or they become a swash of light, and the bodies are always there. I'm just not interested anymore in giving a direct idea about who's that figure, what's that figure. It became biomorphic moments in the work. So yeah, they all start from there. Especially like early on in my career and my, when I was a teenage artist in my 20s, I painted a lot under the influence of like art history and sculptures and, Greek sculptures and all that. So the bodies and the figures were always there.
What's the process of choosing color?
It's a kind of a very intuitive sometimes, but also it's weird how to say that, because it's a process that goes from intuition to very obsessive planning. And I end up in the middle, in between, to where I start always from 3 to 5 main colors. Then these colors become a wide spectrum of other colors that goes in between. And at some phase during my process, the color chooses itself. And because my process very much starts from chaos into precision, I end up with choosing less colors towards the end of the painting, if that makes sense. And then often I'm working on, I call it playing, but it's really working on a series of works at the same time. So these works end up being in conversation, and one painting choice of color and pigments lead to the next one. And for it, becomes a process of continuous different choices.
But when do you know work is finished?
It really when it stops bothering me. Lately I've been there is a certain finish that I am after, to a certain look, because also it's a certain way to enter into the work, but not until, because also the work is heavily invested on many layering. And sometimes at the 50-layer application of oils and that is mixed with linseed oil, that's when I know that it's done, when everything is completely having that svelte look and that finished quality to it. But it's really, the answer is when the paintings stop bothering me.
And when do the titles of the work enter the creative process?
A lot of these titles become a subtitle of the main series. Like, for example, I was just working on my show for Dubai called House of Pearls. So I already had about 20 titles that I finalized in the end. But really, it's a general abstract idea in the beginning of each series of works that lead into the chosen titles will be absolutely after every work is finished, because that's when the idea is actualized. So yeah, I start in the beginning technically, and then it confirms in the end.
Share with us what you're excited about now. Let's talk further about House of Pearls and everything.
I'm really excited about this exhibition at the Third Line Gallery in Dubai. Obviously, I have a deep history in that region, but also I lived in Dubai for 3 years after I immigrated, basically escaped the war in Iraq in 2006. So that was really where my career took a different turn. And, I thought of Dubai as a refuge. I was in the process of taking all my family out after some severe things that happened to our family back then. So I'm excited to go back there and to show there with where my body of work completely changed from that time, because that was 15 years ago. And I'm very excited to work with the Third Line and their team. They've been so supportive and also very engaged in the process of creating this show. So that is something that is exciting me. And obviously, I'm happy to see how the audience there will react to the new body of work, because when I left, the work looked different. Also, I'm excited about my next show in New York with David Nolan Gallery, opening on March 6, 2025. And then I have a 6-year survey show, a traveling museum show that started at Santa Barbara Art Museum. Then it goes to Speed Art Museum in Louisville, Kentucky. Then it ends in Asia Society, Houston. So a lot of exciting things happening, a very busy year ahead.
Yes, that's a lot of work, and that's great to hear. Do you listen to music while you're working?
Yeah, actually, music is part of the work. I listen to a wide range of music, some genres that no one heard of, and some very kind of deep, interesting stuff. But it really kind of trigger my brain in a different way. And I listen to certain stuff in the morning, and I end up with other genres in the evening. So there is rarely any silence in the studio. Sometimes I have these silent moments after a very busy week, but there's always something playing in the background.
Nice. What materials do you use?
So all my works, including the works on paper, actually start from pigments and acrylics and dyes. And I actually use a lot of spray paint in the beginning of the calligraphy of the work. And the process completely changed as I build the first compositions, and after multi-layering process, I start working with oils. So the work always is finished with oils. And I use a certain way to create a glue of oil paint and the linseed oil to give that kind of leathery, that kind of, satiny feel in the end to the work. So these are the main things I work with.
What would you say are some of the most substantial challenges that you've encountered as an artist?
Oh, gosh. I don't know where to start and where to end. I mean, to start from the very serious beginning of what I encountered, it was, my work really put me in danger with the regime that I lived under in Iraq until 2003. I mean, my work put me in direct surveillance, but also questioning about my subject matters. And that was the first challenge, because I really didn't feel safe painting and working with the subject matter I wanted to work with then. But also going into, I moved about 4 countries within 5 years, and I had to restart myself in every spot I was in. And when I immigrated to the US in 2009, I had to start from zero, basically. And that was really the biggest challenge, but also make me appreciate everything right now, because I know exactly how I did everything. Right now, my challenges are mainly having to deal with time, deadlines, physical challenges after working. I average about 12 hours a day at the studio of just basically working, physically and mental exhaustion. But also, it gives you a taste of joy after completing each exhibition or each series of works. I think another challenge I deal with is it's very personal to me, which is not being able to communicate everything verbally, because some of the things I like to say about the work, it's difficult for people to understand. I mean, to relate to the background I come from, but also the reality I'm trying to create as an immigrant, as a woman, as someone who lives in an interesting part of the U.S. as well. But they all are great challenges that goes back into the work and allow me to create more and dig deeper in my practice.
If you weren't a visual artist, what other career path do you think you would have chosen?
Well, I already started because I'm originally a computer engineer, because I had that interest in work and being an artist and in type side of my brain versus, shutting down the other side of my brain, because I had deep interest in mathematics. But I would be many things. I would be an architect, a marine biologist, a DJ. I had many interests. I really would have loved to be a DJ. So there are many things that I'm interested in, but also I feel like being an artist allows you to be many things within your work. So it kind of sums all that up.
So to elaborate on that, I'm going to ask you, what do you enjoy most about your practice?
I just adore the moment that I get into the studio. I have a child excitement before I get here. And there is an aspect of play, no matter how serious you are or your practice or who you're working with, it's you and your materials within, there is a certain safety that I get from being in my studio, but also the sense of discovery, the endless possibilities within the work, These are, I say it in a very simple way, really, because it's endless to me. In a cheesy way, I would say I'd love to live for hundreds of years to see where the work could go. So that is a very exciting thing for me. But also I'm excited about everyone else I encounter during my path, the artists, the curators, the gallerists, the people who are asking you from the most complicated question to the simplest question. All that is exciting for me and enjoyable.
From the perspective of an Iraqi-American artist, do you feel Black art can be defined?
I honestly love this question, and I feel like I don't have the right to answer it, but I'd love to try to answer it. And, as someone who is very somehow, touched in a horrible way by what happened just in the city I live in, just the history of Louisville, but passing through the killing of Breonna Taylor and not ending with many other incidents after that. I feel like you can define the work that came after and during these moments in some way, but I don't know if you can define Black art. I think there are historical moments and the incidents that could define the work, but I also think from my perspective as an Iraqi, if someone could define Iraqi art, or also as a Kurdish woman, because I'm Kurdish, I don't think you could define it, but you could define the history that comes behind it. But also, as someone a child, I was 12 years old when I read Roots by Alex Haley, and I was exposed to the history of slavery and injustice and everything in between. That was a defining moment for me. And I'm always trying to understand more about it. And also I'm influenced by many Black artists and I have huge respect to them. But one of them, Kara Walker is one of my favorite living artists who is working on that subject. And I think she's creating these defining moments we're speaking of. And I don't know if I answered that question because it's a very important question too.
No, you answered it perfectly. It's what was most important to me, and the reason I asked is it's your perspective. Just curious to hear a different perspective. What do you feel is the purpose of art?
Many things. First of all, I think it's the first written history for humans. It's going to be the first and the last. I say it confidently because art is what's going to last in the end. Even if it's destroyed, there's going to be a record for its creation or its existing at some point. Art is what elevates us and reminds us about our humanity. Art is what, for many people, it's the way to survive, to get closer to whatever spiritual thing they believe in my case. And I think art is that the only way for me personally is to know how to exist. So I could talk about what's the purpose of art in my perspective for hours, but I think these are some of the things I think about when I think about it. But also, it's a way to humble yourself. It's for me, when I'm here, when I'm practicing, I'm humbled by my limitations, but I'm also humbled by the discoveries and moments of joy and creation and achievement that happens. So all these things plays into the role of art, if that answers the question.
It does. Your answers, they're all very positive, and I love listening to your answer to questions.
Thank you.
This has been a great interview, and believe it or not, this is our last question.
Oh, wow.
As an artist, what do you feel is your role?
I think, you could be an artist without a role, but that's not me. I wanted to say that in the beginning because also art could save lives in some way, but it doesn't really. We're not doctors. But I feel like I have a historical role towards the communities that I came from and I used to belong to, and somehow I belong to some of these communities, but also the community that I'm within right now. I feel like my role as someone who, as an observer, I'm creating some documentation of my own experience, also as an immigrant, I wouldn't call myself just a war survivor, or, I will say I lived through many wars. I lived through 3 decades of my life. In the beginning, I lived in a war zone. And that taught me a lot of things. And that's why I chose in the end to be a full-time artist. Is the role for me is also to bridge perspectives, to remind myself and the people I'm directly in touch with about our humanity through kind of canceling stereotypes about certain groups of people who think differently of another group of people. I think that's the biggest issue that faces the world right now, is that people are not coming in just to accept that we're all similar in the end, So I think that's my role somehow. I wouldn't claim that I am successful in it or anything. And the simple way I touch people through any observation of my work in person or on the net, or if they read about my narrative, then maybe that will give some glimpse into that background. So that's how I think about it. But I do think in the end, artists are observers and they create history or events. My work is not just about my background. My work right now is pretty much dealing with the now, with what's going on with me and where I am and what I'm observing. So that's what I think about.
Well, thank you for sharing those thoughts and insights with us. I enjoyed our conversation.
Me too. Thank you, Phyllis, for having me and for allowing me the space to share.
It's important.
Thanks. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. For additional content, please visit cerebralwomen.com and be sure to follow Cerebral Women on Instagram.